we're here. Good morning. Right, sorry everyone. I was doing something. I'll sort it later. The Cracked Smile by Anthony Masters. This one is from Haunting Christmas Tales by Point Horror and came out in 1991. So I hope you're ready for a spooky tale. Cracked Smile by Anthony Masters. Jenny had told him never go into the attic, and so far he hadn't. She had always been adamant, but the reasons varied. Sometimes the place was filthy or too much of a muddle. There, my voice is holding out, so well done. Other times there were rats or mice, or the door was stuck. So in the end, over the years, he had given up asking. Ian's curiosity had never been that high anyway, for he had assumed that his aunt was probably right and that there was only a dirty muddle up there with the odd rat or mouse thrown in. On this wet Sunday, with his great friend Freddie away on an enforced outing and Jenny busy with an old folks' tea, Ian's curiosity suddenly became too much for him. He had to go up there now. Lived in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of a town near a council estate and a factory that manufactured cast iron bearings. Once their house had been part of a wealthy farm and mansion, but now that had all gone, and Jenny's house reared up out of the flat landscape, looking old and battered and sour. Jenny was the only relation Ian had. She was his mother's unmarried older sister, in her 50s now, with a sharp and domineering outer shell and a soft, loving interior. By day, she was secretary to the managing director of the factory, and for the rest of the time, she cared for Ian and did good works for the aged. Ian's father had left home when he was a baby, and his mother and older sister had been killed soon after in a road accident that Jenny never talked about. Despite his questions, it was a tragic affair, she had told him. Something I can't bear to talk about. Maybe I'll tell you one day, but not now, Ian, not now. He had accepted that it was all too painful for her and had not questioned her for some years. He had not really felt the need. He could remember nothing about his early childhood except being in another house, somewhere small in the centre of town, sitting in a playpen, surrounded by broken, battered dolls. His aunt had at least found herself able to explain that. You have to realise you were all very poor, living in that damp cottage while he was out. She had to do anything she could lay her hands on to make money. That was why she started repairing broken dolls, called it a doll's hospital. She was that desperate. Jenny only referred to his father as him and refused to talk about him. So over the years, Ian gathered that he only aroused in her feelings of deep hatred. The attic was approached by a pull-down ladder and a small door that was locked. But Ian knew Jenny kept all her spare keys at the back of the enormous stone ladder, and while she was out, he found the key he needed after 10 minutes of turning each one in the keyhole At last, the door swung silently open, and a musty smell immediately hit his nostrils. He thought he searched for a light switch, but when he found it, it didn't work, so he had to rely on his wide but not very powerful beam. He was right. The attic was certainly a dusty muddle, but nothing scuttled or ran under beneath his feet. So he continued to flash the beam around, at first erratically, and then more systematically. A dull disappointment crept over him as he realized there was nothing out of the ordinary. He could hear the rain beating down on the roof, and through a grubby skylight could see the overcast, pitted sky outside. He could imagine the leaden rain falling on the council estate and factory, and his sense of disappointment made him feel as miserable inside as the landscape looked outside. Ian continued his slow inventory of the attic. Old furniture, mattresses, a broken table, piles of magazines, books, discarded clothes, a collapsed dining board, a glass container of stuffed birds, part of a table tennis bat and a table tennis table, scattered boxes, and in the corner, a pile of old, battered, broken dolls. He moved over to them without interest until his beam picked out a single doll, sitting slumped on a tiny chair. A sense of shock filled him suddenly, making his mouth go dry and filling him with an uneasy, tingling sensation. Why? There seemed no reason. The doll's face was covered in a mask of dust, and Ian rubbed at it tentatively. The result was horrific. One eye remained, the other was a dark socket. The cheeks were scaled and stained, the nose smashed, an ear hung loose, and there was a hole in one cheek. But far, far worse were the lips that should have been pouting bow, but instead seemed to be set in a cracked and twisted smile. Suddenly Ian felt dizzy, and he sat down quickly on an old leather sofa that smelt of decay. Almost immediately, his eyelids became incredibly heavy, and he felt a lurching sensation as if he were slipping into a void. There was a roaring in his ears, and he closed his eyes. When he forced them open again, he saw that the room was moving about him, suffused in a shadow and sharply distorted. The roaring sound continues, but above it he heard the screaming of the brakes as his eyes closed for a second time. Instinctively, he reopened them and saw that he was lying on the side facing the doll with a cracked smile. He whimpered as the smile seemed to widen, and then cried out in terror as a tiny laughter whinnied from the plastic inside. The laughter continued like cheap music, and the ground flowed to emotion and halted. Heaviness lifted, and Ian stumbled to his feet and ran to the door of the attic. For a moment he rattled at it desperately, but the handle wouldn't move. Suddenly it turned, and he wrenched the door open and climbed down the ladder as fast as he could. When he reached the bottom, he was shaking so much that he could hardly stand. The rain seemed to increase in its intensity outside, and only gradually did his strength return. The detention room was full of the usual crowd, and Mrs. Small was in charge. She would be, thought Ian. She always seemed to enjoy the gloom-charged atmosphere and the resentful scratching of pens and biros. He had gone to bed early the previous night, dazed by his experience, and had slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. When he woke, the attic episode seemed confused and unreal. Yet throughout the day, he had felt his concentration slipping, and at lunchtime, agreeing to play football with Freddie too near the school building, he had broken a window, which had landed him in detention. He sat and wrote and looked out of the window. It was almost Christmas, and a covering of snow a few days before had turned to thick black slush. It was dark and wet, and he wished that Freddie was with him. They had been friends since primary school, and now they were in their first year at the comprehensive. Their friendship remained as firm as ever. "All right, you can go," Mrs. Small said eventually, "and no noise." No one listened as they charged out, heading home for tea and chips and telly. But Ian's bus was not due for another half hour, and he sauntered across the playground and down the dark high street to the bus stop. Glancing at his watch, he saw he still had another 20 minutes before the bus came, so he wandered down a shabby side street, then turned into another smaller street, which was even more run down than the last. He had never been here before, he realized, and looked about with some curiosity. Most of the shops were empty. A small chapel bore a sign saying, "Have you heard the good news?" And a little weather-bordered cottage, obviously some hundreds of years old, leaned crazily over the pavement. The glass in the windows was broken, the boarding rotting away, and some of the slates in the roof had fallen to the pavement. A small sign over the door, its paint so faded that he could only just make out the words, "Red Dolls Hospital." Shockwaves coursed through Ian. Broken dolls again? Just a coincidence, it must be. Down the side of the shop was this little alley covered in mounds of litter. Slowly, cautiously, he began to walk down it. Wait, it was Freddie, his blonde hair shining in the light of the street lamp, staring at him from behind an old rain barrel. Ian was startled to see him, thinking he had gone home ages ago. "What are you up to?" Ian asked suspiciously. There's lead on the roof down in this yard." "So, you can sell lead, can you? Isn't it against the law?" Freddie ignored him. "Want to take a look?" Ian glanced at his watch. He still had quarter of an hour before the bus went. Why not? Freddie led the way through the debris to a sad little moonlit yard, full of dilapidated sheds and tumbling buildings. "Look there," he pointed. He was right, thought Ian gloomily. There was some lead still in place. Trust Freddie to find it. Then he heard something and whispered and whipped around. What was that? Eh? Somebody up there. There. Freddie was still looking at the lead on the roof and trying to estimate how much it would fetch. If there was one subject he was good at, it was maths, and he gave himself plenty of practice. In the house. A dosser. He turned round, his fair skin grubby, looking older and harder than his years. "Let's go and surprise him." It wasn't like that. What was it like then? He was getting bored. More like crying. I'm going to take a look." Okay. For once, Ian had put himself in the position of leader, and rather hesitantly, he walked over to the broken in back door of the cottage and pushed his way through. Once inside the tiny kitchen, the boys paused, almost overcome by the smell of damp and mold. "Wow!" said Freddie. "What a tip!" Ian heard the sound again. and at the same time felt an extraordinarily overpowering sense of familiarity. He began to shiver, the chill that started somewhere deep inside him. Didn't you hear it? No. It came from upstairs. Someone's crying. Freddie went to have a look. Better be careful, the wood's rotten. You scared? Asked Ian. No. Let's go up there then. All I'm saying is, began Freddie, the wood's rotten. Yes, I can see it is. Without any further comment, feeling quite normal again, Ian began to climb the stairs. Freddie following rather more cautiously. The stairs held, despite ominous creaking, and they eventually found themselves on a landing. Obviously, someone had been up there. The cans, food wrappings, and a couple of bottles lay on the floor. Ian nudged open one of the doors, but there was nothing inside except piles of rubbish and rubble where part of the roof had collapsed. Then he moved across the landing, pushed open another door, and saw her standing by the window. She was dressed in a pair of old corduroy trousers and a sweater, tears running down her cheeks, her hands clenched into white fists. There was something slightly dated about her clothes, and the sobbing increased. As Ian watched from the threshold, beside her stood a girl of about 10, clutching a doll. That seemed odd, thought Ian. Surely she's a bit old for dolls now. She was even more insubstantial than the woman. Around them were vague outlines of benches and tables, and on every surface, the grey shapes of dozens of different dolls of all sizes. Most of them looked battered or broken. Ian gasped, and his whole body began to take and seemed to shake. It was suddenly terribly cold again, and he felt freezing inside. Then the woman and the girl bent down. The little girl sat on something, and dimly he could see that it was a suitcase. The woman fastened it, and they both stood up slowly. Then they walked straight through him. Go on, don't push. Don't you stand there then. Shut up. Ian wheeled round to the surprised Freddie. Just shut up. Didn't you see them? Who? Woman. The little girl. Broken doll. You're seeing things, scoffed Freddie. "They're not. They were there. Not there now, Freddie pointed out. And never were, he added. They were, insisted Ian belligerently. Look at the dust. Freddie's voice was impatient now. He was right. The whole of the floor was covered in thick dust, and there wasn't a mark anywhere. Ian felt the chills stealing over him for the third time. Then the words "Doll's Hospital" glanced into his mind, and a feeling of nausea overcame him. Desperately, he tried to resist the thought of what it all meant. As he walked cautiously across the room, leaving a trail of footprints, he suddenly recoiled and cried out. "What's up now?" snapped Freddie. "Something touched me." "You trying to wind me up by chance?" Freddie asked hastily. "If so, I can tell you you're not succeeding." There was an uneasy silence. "You'll miss the bus," said Freddie at last, not knowing how to handle the situation and trying to bring the conversation down to earth again. "Yes, no, red thing, 4 wheels, or is it 6? As a driver goes on a road. The road's usually black with white lines." He would have continued had Ian not yelled at him to shut up. "Aren't you coming?" asked Ian hurriedly. "Thought I'd stay around." "You're going to nick that lead, aren't you?" "No, I'm not," said Freddie evasively. "Yeah." But Ian didn't have time to stop. He pushed past him and ran down the rickety steps to the alley and then to the street outside. He had a few seconds. He knew he had to catch the bus or Jenny would be furious. He had managed to ring her from school and she had been bad enough over the detention, and he had promised faithfully he would catch the 6 o'clock bus. Freddie's mother didn't worry so much, and she was often out when he got back anyway, so he had to get his own tea. As he ran, Ian began to feel faint, and the shops and the houses in the high street seemed to blur. When he turned into the high street, he felt even worse. His head was spinning so much that he had difficulty in keeping his balance and knowing where he was going. Several times he bumped into people, but the odd thing was that he could hardly feel any impact at all. Everyone seemed out of proportion, and the spinning feeling was replaced by a strange surging motion. A swirling mist made the shops look different. Then he saw that they were different. Supermarket didn't seem to be there. Instead, there was a grocer. A cinema called the Roxy occupied the site where the furnishers had been, and the petrol and petrol pumps fronted what had been the car showroom. He began to notice other changes. An ironmonger's had been replaced by a hair salon. There was a shoe repair shop instead of a Wimpy. And wasn't that a butcher's instead of? He didn't have time to think. As the number 19 bus rumbled down the road, even the bus was different. A single instead of a double decker, and a strange look to it. The mist was hanging about in patches, and the people around him seemed almost transparent. When the bus drew up, he was surprised to find that the driver didn't take the fare, and there was a conductor instead. Hadn't Jenny told him that conductors had been replaced ages ago? What on earth was going on? Ian boarded the bus. It was empty except for two passengers near the front. He showed his bus pass to the conductor, who hardly seemed to glance at it, but stayed on the back step, watching the street with its shadowy shapes, seemingly intent on anything but the interior. It was weird, thought Ian. The bus was usually quite crowded. Where was everybody? Then he noticed that it was no longer dark outside. No longer dark? This was ridiculous. Crazy. He glanced at his watch. It was 5:20 on a December evening, and yet the mist was parting to reveal a morning light. He was sure of it. He must ask someone. Who was at the front? Ian peered ahead, but despite the hard light outside, the interior of the bus was dim, as if all the mist had seeped in. Yet, yes, there were two passengers, one quite small, maybe a child. He would have to go and investigate. Glancing at the conductor, he rose from his seat and walked down the aisle towards the driver and the hunched passengers. When he got there, he recognized the girl who had been sitting on the suitcase. Her shape was much stronger than the woman's beside her, who seemed to be shifting and swirling, as if she were part of the mist. "Excuse me." She had a round face, snub nose, freckles, and long brown hair that fell to her shoulders. She was wearing a print summer dress, the black formal shoes. white socks, and on her lap was a doll. Yes, thought Ian, she's definitely the girl in the room, but now I can see her much more sharply. She looked up at him warily. What do you want? Her voice was very clear. Then she added, I can't see you properly. I'm sorry. I don't understand why it's daylight. When I set out, it was dark. She stared at him as if he were crazy and glanced nervously over her shoulder at the conductor, who still seemed oblivious to their presence. It won't hurt you, Ian reassured her. She kept darting little glances out of the window and seemed very agitated, but he sensed she was not afraid. She was clearly concerned with something else. You shouldn't be here. No one comes on this bus except us, the four of us. You'll have to get off. Is that your mother? She can't see you. No one else can see you. No one here. You were in her house, weren't you? Yes. What are you? She asked hesitantly. Some kind of ghost? Ian had been about to ask her the same question, but he didn't dare, for the coldness inside him was increasing so much that he could hardly bear the pain. Why is it daylight? He asked. He felt that if at least he knew the answer to that, it would be the beginning. But all she could do was shake her head and repeat, You must get off. It's very dangerous to be riding a bus. The bus speeded up as they emerged into open countryside. And that was funny too, thought Ian. When he usually made the journey from Middleton, the streets sprawled right up to their home, but now there were great rolling fields and isolated spinneys of trees, with crows wheeling overhead. He could hear them calling over the engine noise and rattling of the bus. Ian couldn't remember any of this. Maybe they were taking a different route, but even so, why on earth were they going at such speed? Look, isn't he driving too fast? He asked the girl impatiently. He's got to, she replied unexpectedly. Eh? He's got to, she repeated fiercely. But this is a bus. Buses aren't meant to go fast like this. There is a reason. There was something wrong with her voice now. It sounded distant and slightly distorted. Of course, there must be something wrong with his ears. That must be it. That explained the muzziness. Maybe that was what made his sense of balance so odd. Reason? He asked. My father's trying to get me, she replied. Get you? Yes. He lost custody yesterday, and said he's going to take me away, and he's coming down from Birmingham. There was a short silence. Then Ian asked abruptly, Where are you going? To my Aunt Jenny. Who? I said my Aunt Jenny. Ian felt as if someone had punched him hard in the chest. I know he's taking a risk, her voice dislocated, though it seemed quite steady. I know he's going very fast. Who? Ian's voice shook at his own disorientation. The driver, his mum's friend, his special friend. It was the only way. We don't have a car. He said he'd bring his bus. There's a private sign on it. We've been doing it for a long time. But couldn't your father just come to your aunt's and take you? He could hardly believe what was happening, and the cold inside was burning him. Oh no, Auntie Jenny would stand up to him. She's a really strong person. Couldn't Auntie Jenny have come to collect you? Insisted Ian. The more he heard, the more pain he felt. He began to wonder how much longer he could bear it. She hasn't got a car either. "Hmm, he's really going very fast," said Ian as they swerved around a corner. "Yes, it's like that. Don't be afraid." For the first time, there was a warmth in his voice. "Aren't you a bit old for a doll?" She shrugged. "I've always had her," she said. "I need her more than ever now." "Who are you?" he asked. "You know who I am." "I don't. Can't you see? We're like each other, aren't we?" "Is it always like this?" For some reason he couldn't understand. He didn't want to give her a direct reply. "This is what we do," she said. "We're always on this bus, all four of us." "But why?" "My doll," she said, clasping it to her. "She's going to get hurt, and my mum won't be able to repair her." "Why not?" "She's going to die, silly. We're all going to die. We keep on dying every day. It's awful." "I don't understand," muttered Ian. "You do, you do really. But why are you always dying?" She didn't reply directly. Instead, she said, "I'm so unhappy about Sally. Sally, my doll. I can't bear to think of her all smashed up. Maybe that's why we have to keep on riding the bus, keep on dying all the time. I must know that Sally's safe." Then passed a hand across his face and gave a little cry. "Are you hurting?" she asked. "Yes." Suddenly she brightened up. "Maybe you're here for a reason. You're the first person ever. Will you take Sally and then get off?" "How can I? The bus is going so fast." "Oh, that'll be all right." "How do you know?" "I just do. Take her. Take Sally." I tried to pass the doll to him, but Ian grasped misty air. "I can't feel anything." "It's not working," she said, and tears filled her eyes. "It's not fair. She always gets smashed." Ian wanted to comfort her, but he had to concentrate on keeping his balance. And now the wildly swaying bus. The pain was getting worse, and he knew he couldn't bear it much longer. "There must be a reason," she said again. "For what?" "For us being able to see each other. For you coming on board. For us to be able to speak. You and Mum don't seem to be able to reach each other at all. Maybe it's the doll." The pain receded for a merciful moment, and his mind cleared. "She's in the attic." The thought had come into his head quite suddenly, for no apparent reason. "She's in Jenny's attic. You live there?" His voice choked. "Where else can I live, now you've both gone?" He reached out and he felt the cobwebby touch on his forehead, just as he had done in the room in the cottage. "We left you with Jenny while we went back to the dolls' hospital to fetch the last few things. But we never came back." Sally thought. Sally was smashed. "Will you have her repaired?" "I promise." He thought of the crooked, damaged, horrible smile and looked down at the unblemished, waxy face staring at it hard. "What are you doing?" she asked, puzzled. "Remembering how she was, so she can look like that again." The pain suddenly returned, stabbing at him viciously. "You've got to get off," she said urgently. "No, you must. It's dangerous." "Can I see you again?" "Of course not." "Please, you must get off." Her voice was fainter, and the cold pain was sharper, more probing. "What's your name?" "Sophie." Doesn't Didn't Aunt Jenny tell you anything?" "No, she was too upset. There aren't any photographs of you or Mum." "I can't say it." "Poor you. Poor Jenny." She looked down at Sally. "You'll repair her, won't you?" she repeated. "So she'll be just as she is now. Promise?" "I promise." "Now go." "I'm staying anyway. We haven't come to my stop." He was determined to hang on, to fight the pain. "This bus never stops." Her voice sounded even more dislocated. "Go." The pain increased until Ian was beaten. Angrily, he stumbled up the aisle until he came to a step. The conductor gave him a little shove, but it was more like a breeze on his back. He jumped down onto the ground, and the bus pulled away amidst a giant cloud of dust. Before it had settled, another vehicle roared past. It was a Rover, an old model. Ian caught a fleeting glimpse of a face behind the wheel. The driver's expression was contorted with fury and hatred. He knew he had just seen his father. Another cloud of dust blew up behind the Rover and enveloped Ian. When it cleared, he saw that the alien open countryside had gone, and in its place stood the estate, and the house and the factory on the other side of the river in all their tawdry, tatty glory. After supper, Ian went straight up to his room and pretended to do his homework. Instead, he lay on his bed and tried to think rationally about the extraordinary events of the last few hours. The cottage, the strange misty shimmering and distortion of the streets, the weird journey on the bus with his sister and her doll and his mother, the pain and the shock of the manacled cage and the face of his father. Suddenly, amongst all the confusion, he realized something vitally important. Beyond anything else, beyond all the hurting, beyond even the with his mother, he was desperate to see Sophie again, his sister. Curious that he was now older than her, their roles were reversed. He felt protective towards her. What was going to happen to her? What had happened to her? Was she a ghost, or some sort of echo, or simply a manifestation of his own fantasies? He looked up at the posters of his bedroom wall. Knights and sorcerers, strange beasts, and two-headed women. She wasn't like any of those. Sophie wasn't a fantasy. Later, he plunged into a deep and utterly dreamless sleep and woke refreshed. His mind was completely clear, and he knew what he had to do. Today, he would see Sophie again and would save her from his father. Lenny, I'm late. I want to ask you something. Ask while I do you an egg. She was always in a rush in the morning, as she had to be at work at 8:30. Was there ever a single-decker bus on this route? What a funny question. Immediately she was tense. Yes, but was there? He persisted. I can't remember, she replied evasively. Did they drive fast? He knew he was excuse me, knew he was persecuting her, but he knew he had to know to be sure that it all happened. And she knew she was the only one who could really help him. Fast? What a funny question. But did they drive fast? One did, she said very suddenly. Then she went quiet. One. Ian felt sick. What do you mean, one? Jenny looked at him hard. How did you find out? She asked brokenly. Ian shrugged. It doesn't matter. Why do you want to know? Her eyes seemed to be burning into him. I just do. Come on, Jenny, you must explain. You must tell me. It's not easy for me to explain, especially to you. It was between your parents and my sister. Yes, well, your father loved them both, you know. He loved them, and he did that. He was incredulous, loved and hated in equal amounts. Her voice was crisp and to the point. I'm trying to be fair. You know how I feel about him. Anyway, when he lost custody, he threatened to take Sophie away. The two of them were at the cottage packing up, and of course, Anna, your mother, should have called the police. But she panicked and phoned her boyfriend, a bus driver, and he brought along an off-duty bus. Just took it from the garage. Bill Sampson was, and his mate Tim, his usual conductor, came with him. Of course, it was all absurd. She'd have been much safer on the regular bus on the route, but she wasn't thinking. None of them were thinking, not even your dad. Peter came to the cottage and found she'd gone, and a neighbour told him she'd seen them getting on the bus. He followed. The bus was going at full speed. Tried to overtake. Her voice shook and broke. I should have told you all these years ago. No, it's the pain. I felt that, he said reassuringly. It was very big. Were they all killed? Tom? Your father wasn't, you know. He's still alive somewhere. Did he go to prison? Was he? No, he was prosecuted for dangerous driving, that's all. You can imagine how what he did broke him. Yes. Was there anything else? She asked gently. Suddenly he felt compelled to tell her. I'd been up in the attic. She stared at him in silence. Are you angry? No. Her voice was very low. Those dolls, they were the only ones your mother was repairing. In all the confusion after the accident, they were never reclaimed. The one in the chair, the one with the smashed face, that was Sophie's special doll. She wouldn't give it up even when she got older. It was given to me. Someone found it. Would it be repaired? Well, please, I'm sure it would make Sophie very happy. Yes, said Jenny slowly. She could be repaired. Her name's Sally. Ian had no idea how he got through school, but somehow he did. After lunch, he wandered down to the far end of the playing field so that he could be alone and think. Although really was no need, he knew exactly what he had to do. He trod softly up the cottage rickety stairs. Suppose they weren't there? Suppose the cottage couldn't weave its magic? Would he ever see Sophie again? It was an unbearable thought. Then he saw them, the vague and shadowy. He could see nothing else. No dolls, no suitcase, nothing. Just a very wraith of an outline. But surely that was enough. Please God, that would be enough. Go away. The words were somehow in his mind rather than spoken. He sensed her touch, gossamer at first, on his forehead. It felt more like a kiss than a caress. We're going to repair the doll, he whispered. We're going to repair Sally. Then he began to gabble senselessly. Don't go on the bus. You'll die if you. Don't be stupid, the voice, the thought of the voice said. Of course, we're going to die. Thank you for Sally. Now go. You must go away. I'm going to save you. He was beside himself with an illogical rage now. I must save you. We're going, the thought said as her outline shimmered and the bleached out. It was like a negative. You can't save us. I'll be on the bus, he yelled. No. And his mother faded out completely. He ran down the stairs as fast as he could, out of the cottage, into into the alley and down the street. Things were more dislocated than ever. He seemed to be running through people, through a lamp post, and then through an old-fashioned telephone box. Then he was in what he took to be the high street, and yes, there was a single-decker bus. It was just drawing away. He saw Sophie sitting in the front, just where he had seen her before. This time, though, she was very blurred. He could hardly see his mother at all. They seemed to fade even more as she approached them, and he began to panic. "Sophie!" She didn't turn. "Sophie!" He sat down next to her, and the seat felt like hot wool. "You shouldn't be here," she said very faintly. "I'm going to save you," he yelled. She said something else he couldn't hear, her beautiful face transparent. "I'm going to save you." "You can't." "I can save you," he shouted. "Get off the bus with me. We can all jump." The vehicle was shuddering with speed now. It seemed to be going even faster than yesterday, as the townscape vanished and the unfamiliar countryside appeared. "Come on, get up." "No." Her voice was clearer. "You must. You can't change things." "I can. We can. Take my hand." The icy pain lashed at him, and he cried aloud in agony. "No, please, you can't change things," she repeated doggedly. To his horror, Ian could hardly see her now. "My father's coming," she said. "He comes every day." "Sophie, we have to keep going." The interior of the bus, Sophie's body, the conductor behind him, and his mother in the distance, all were fading into nothing. "Sophie, take my hand." Suddenly Ian felt her hand in his, warm and comforting. Then he screamed aloud as it turned to ice in his palm. The last traces of everything around him evaporated into a kind of cold steam. He found himself standing by the roadside. The road narrowed at the bridge, a few meters away from him, and he saw the bus trying to slow down. Then he heard the screeching of brakes as another shape appeared, the faint shape of an old-fashioned rover. He fleetingly glimpsed at the hard, set face of his father, consumed by hatred. The screeching of brakes seemed to go on forever. Then there was a tremendous impact, followed by a deep and painful, appalling silence. Ian lay on his bed, totally exhausted. He cried for a while, weeping for his dead mother and sister, the tears coming as if they would never stop. Then he rose, went down to the kitchen, and took the attic key and climbed back up to the landing, pulled down the collapsible stairs, and started to climb them. At the top he paused, wondering if the pain would come back, but it didn't, and he unlocked the door. The moon had risen, and a warm light filtered into the jumbled interior throughout the skylight. A beam seemed to soften the pile of broken dolls, and threw its jaundiced light on Sally, the doll with the cracked smile. But this time, the smile didn't seem evil, just sad. Ian picked Sally up and kissed her on the battered lips. They seemed strangely soft, but when he ran his hand over them, they were simply fragmented plastic. He kissed them again and whispered, "Don't worry, you're all right. We're going to be mended, I promise." As he spoke the new words, he knew in his heart that it was all over for Sophie. Her eternal bus journey had come to an end. Oh, Sorry. My throat. I'm feeling very, very sore today. I can tell you that. I'm gonna have a little break, and I'll be back in a minute with a drink, and I'll have swapped the washing. Okay. Oh, excuse me. This cold is an absolute pain. Thank goodness for Lucas' sake. Sorry. Share. Oh, hello, Larry. I didn't realise you'd joined us. And Vera, when I get into my stories, what we're gonna have next. Mm. Breastfeeding and yeah, Breastfeeding and Claren by Joan Aitken. This is from 1991. Try another story for you. See if my voice holds out. Oh dear, chair's broken. Uh, right, see if the chair will support my weight. Shocker. Never mind. Just want to throw myself through the floor. Try another story for you. If my If my voice holds out. Anyway, this one is Crispian Clarion. Claren. Claren, not Clarion. It's Claren. Let's get the words right. From 1991. From Haunting Christmas Tales by Point Horror. You ask why I prefer to run a school for dropouts, for delinquents. Well, I will tell you. Put another log on the fire. My story goes back a long way. My throat is like razor blades today. But it's better than it has been. When I was a child, said the headmaster, gazing at the leaping flames, Christmas was the time of year that I hated most. It arrived always and put me in a black mood, and from that kind of black mood, danger can build up. Parents, you see, were elderly, he in his 50s, she in her 40s when I was born. A most unexpected and, I fear, most unwelcome addition to the family. My elder brother was long since off in the world, farming in Canada. My father, a successful writer of scientific textbooks, could live as and where he chose. And what he had chosen for the past 10 years was to spend a month or so each Christmas in the south of France with my mother, and to take a small, tiresome child with them formed no part of this program. My presence would have ruined their agreeable holiday. In fact, it was not to be thought of. From age 4, accordingly, or it may even have been from age 3, I was so young that I am not certain to a year when the arrangements first began. I was dispatched every Christmas to North Country, to Marwick, to stay with my Aunt Nesta and Uncle Simon and my cousin Becky. Oh, how bitterly I resented this! And as soon as I began going to school, I resented it even more. Other children began looking forwards to Christmas, home for weeks and months in advance. They had all kinds of joyful family rituals and long-standing practices, remembered from year to year, for which they planned and schemed and saved their pocket money. The flowers for mother, mince pies and dancing at midnight on Christmas Eve, conspiratorial fillings and hanging up of stockings, mixing of cakes and puddings, fetching the tree home, singing carols around the piano, and decorating the house. We always make holly chains from baskets and baskets of holly leaves threaded onto a string, said one girl in my class. It takes days to make the long ones, and oh, how they prick your fingers. It's agony, but they look superb and rich when they're hung up like tapestries. We always take the dog to the beach on Christmas morning for a 2-hour walk. Always. Sometimes the sand is frozen and the wind is bitterly cold, and it's wonderful to think of the turkey back at home in the oven, getting browner and browner. Sisters and I always act a play on Christmas night, said another boy. It's in verse and it takes weeks to write. and my aunts and uncles and grandparents come to watch. It's a bit silly, but I think they'd miss it if we didn't do it. Needless to say, nothing of this kind took place in my home. The festive season to my parents was merely a time to ignore as far as possible and to get through as quietly as and inconspicuously as possible. I suppose even in their villa on the Riviera, it must have been difficult not to beware of lights, decorations, and seasonal gaieties going on outside. But these need to be of no concern of theirs. They had their own circle and managed very well in their own matter-of-fact way. And I, meanwhile, was sent up to Marwick with my uncle and my aunt and my cousin Becky, a year older than me, and presently her 2 baby brothers. Marwick is a bleak, bleak place on the East Coast. It is one of those grey, grim towns that seem to cling to the ground, bracing themselves against the fierce wind that comes scouring in from Siberia. My Uncle Simon's house, a big, ugly one, stood on a hillside at the edge of the town. From the top of its high garden wall, necessarily to keep the cabbages from blowing out of the ground, you could see Harwick Castle, a crumbling ruin built long ago for defence against marauding Vikings and the North Sea, a leaden ruled line across the horizon. All the trees leaned sideways as if they wanted to grab hold of the ground. My Aunt Nesta protected her favourite garden plants with glass colosses, and these were continually being blown over and smashed in ferocious gales, so that the garden was a minefield of broken glass. My smaller cousins were never permitted to stray unescorted. Another hazard was the pond, said to be 20 feet deep. Uncle, a manager at a steel foundry in the neighbourhood town of Foreskirk, told us that the pond had been used for ironwork in the Middle Ages. He was fond of history and used to tell Becky stories about the Danes and the Norsemen when he took us for walks. I think the pond was one of the reasons why he had bought Kelso House, which was otherwise inconvenient, rambling, much too big, and frightfully cold. The wind whistled through its large, ill-fitting windows and along its uncarpeted corridors. She was delicate. This was one of the many reasons why I disliked her. A pale girl with transparent white skin and guileless grey eyes. She was subject to asthma and bronchial troubles. Her hair, very fair, hung in 2 plaits like Viking girls. Whenever we went outside, she had to wrap up with extreme care, putting on layers and layers of wool and covering her neck and ears with hoods and scarves and mufflers. I found this pretty and sissy and thought it was all affection and probably not needed at all. I'm afraid it can't be denied that I was a very unpleasant boy, self-centered, intolerant, narrow, almost completely unaware of other people's rights or needs or interests. I was also a thief, as you will presently see. That gives me an insight now. I have never been treated with generosity at home, and I saw no occasion to be generous to others. What other reasons had I for disliking Becky? Aesthetically, she was very fond of me. This, I suppose, was because she was rather lonely. Often she would not be considered well enough to go to school, and so must stay at home, reading all the books in the house, of which there were hundreds. My Aunt Nesta was a great reader, and was prepared, if ever she had time, to read aloud to us, but she was very busy most of the day, looking after the awkward, badly equipped house and two younger boys, who were much too small to be any use in Becky and my games. "Oh, John, I wish you could stay here all the time," Becky used to say sadly, when my time to leave was approaching. And I, for my part, was counting the days, the hours, the minutes. "We have so much more fun when you're here." Poor little Becky, little did she realise how tedious and irritating I often found her. She was always inventing new games. On the days when she was not allowed out, of which there were many, she would announce, "Let's play Hunt the Minotaur." "Oh Lord, why can't we play Halma or Dominoes or Racing Demon?" I was rather lazy and would always prefer to sit still and play a card game or a board game to me, but they had more point than her endless pretences. Becky, who spent hours in bed reading when she had bronchitis, produced a non-stop flow of ideas gathered from books. Oh, I'm sorry. That's better. My chair keeps shrinking. Yes. Our house was full of big old-fashioned screens, vitally necessary to keep drafts at bay. Remember that this was before the days of central heating. Coal and wood fires were all we had to warm us. Becky fetched all the screens into Uncle Simon's study and constructed a maze with the narrow passages between the folding walls. You can be Theseus and I'll be Ariadne. But what can we do for a Minotaur? What is a Minotaur? I would ask glumly, longing to get away and play clock payments or read Lives the Hunted. I cared little for all the storybooks that they had in the house. Luckily, they also had a good number of animal books, which, though not as interesting as books about aircraft or cars, were better than nothing. Minotaur is a frightful monster, half man, half bull, which eats a person every day and lives in a maze. I think we'll just have to imagine the Minotaur. All right, I would agree. Yawning, longing for the game to be over. When we go out, things were not so bad, except for the afternoons when Aunt Nesta asked us to push the little boys in their pushchairs down into the town on some shopping errand. Those were dreadful excursions. I felt such a fool, acting as a nursery maid to little Robbie or little Will. Not that they misbehaved, but I was sure all the time we were out that people were laughing or sneering at us. though they concealed it. Mm. And I love the old ladies who hung over the brats, cooing and chirruping. How they do grow! Hear the bonny wings. Becky didn't seem to mind. She knew all the old ladies, of course. Even worse, they all seemed to know me, though I couldn't tell one from another. "Well, well, John boy, it's grand to have you back again. You might ought to let you stop here all the year round." She ought to, indeed. The very thought made him shiver with horror. I had a useful trick for keeping little boys quiet and quelled, which also worked excellently on Becky when we were both younger, and I wanted to get my own way if we disagreed about something. I had this knack of shaking my eyes. I'm the only person I have ever come across with this ability, and I have long ago forgotten when or how I discovered the skill. I simply let both eyes go out of focus and blur until they start to vibrate from side to side. They did very fast, about as fast as a woodpecker working on a tree. It was quite a strain to keep it up for more than a minute, but seemed to do the eyes no harm. For all I know, it may be a good exercise for the muscles or relax the optic nerve. Anyway, for a number of years, it gave me complete control over Becky. I can't think, couldn't think then why it should be frightening, but quite plainly it was so. She used to weep with sheer terror and beg me to stop. "Oh, please don't do it, John. Please don't. You look awful." Annoyingly, I could not myself see how I looked. I tried to study myself in the mirror when alone, but my vision, of course, blurred while my eyes were oscillating, and all I could see was a big shape in the glass. That was then. Now I know more. It's so it makes you look not human, as if some horrible evil creature got into your body. Please, please stop. We'll play drafts if that's what you'd rather. You can have the book. I'll find something else to read. Or listen to cricket on the radio instead of going out. I'll ask Mummy if we can have tomato soup for supper. It was the first-rate way of getting what I wanted. And then one year, I suddenly found that it had lost its power. Even if I pulled a horrible face while I made my eyes quiver, bared my teeth, glared, snarled, and she simply laughed, her mild, comfortable laugh. My cousin Becky had no sense of humour whatsoever, and she said indulgently, "Oh, John, you are funny when you do that." Tricks still work well with the little boys. Can I do it still? I haven't tried for 30 years, and have no intention of doing so. Not after what happened. That comes later in the story. At least when we were out in the street, therefore, the boys were humble and biddable, though at home they could sometimes be perfect little devils. Luckily, my Aunt Nesta had a young girl from town who came and took them out on most afternoons, and then Becky and I could climb trees or get on top of the garden. I showed her how. She wouldn't dare to do it on her own. Or if the weather was not so snowy, we could go up the moor behind the house. This was interesting because it still had trenches dug for civil defence in the last war. They were like tunnels with heather growing across the top. Becky didn't like them much unless she was allowed to play Saxons and Normans or Romans and Pikers. One or another of her silly pretend games. When now bored, I used to get on to those visits to Marwick, and the worst part of it all was Christmas itself. Aunt Nesta and Uncle Simon did not go in for a great deal of Christmas ritual and tradition. They were plain, simple people. He drove off each day to his job at the steelworks. She housekept and looked after the children, saw that Becky's chest was well wrapped up. They could not afford and did not wish for expensive entertainment or fancy habits. At Christmas dinner, they always asked if some old person from the town who would otherwise have been alone. They had a small Christmas tree, simply decorated with gilded pine cones and nuts and red paper flowers, and a rather modest quantity of brandy was poured over the pudding. Christmas should be in the heart, Aunt Nesta would say, not in a lot of fancy extras. But in one way, I suppose, in the way that counted, they did take trouble and spend money, and that was over presents. My presents from my parents were always exactly the same. From my father, his latest textbook, architecture for sixth forms, cellular structure explained, optics made easy, understanding the differential calculus, the principles of physics, a comprehensive view of modern history, basic geography, and space made simple. There never was a subject that my father was not prepared to tackle. I had a whole row of his books standing on my bedroom mantelpiece at home, some in fancy leather bindings made by the publishers as a commemorative gift to my father on their 20th reprinting. Sold forever. All he needed to do was revise them from time to time. My mother invariably gave me 2 new shirts. These presents were always packed in my bag when I left for Marwick, wrapped in red Christmas paper, ready for me to open them on Christmas Day. Often I left them unopened and brought them home still wrapped, unless I happened to have used all my shirts and needed another. Christmas would have been a bleak indeed if their gifts were all I had to rely on. But Uncle Simon and Aunt Nesta did not stop at just one present. They gave a whole series: books, comfortable casual clothes, chocolates, games, toys, or simply interesting things. Once Uncle Simon gave me a powder horn studded with coral and turquoise beads. Once a snake beaded all over and along its side the message made by Turkish prisoners of war in 1918. Then there was tiny Indian brass box, and I was grateful for this largesse. No, I was not. I was very ungrateful, as you shall hear. Every year, besides the fudge, mittens, books, dairy, diary, pocket torch, cat pistol, or whatever there would be one superior present, the main present. Nicky used to call it, and their habit over this was to give the same thing to each of us. One year, a fine case of pastel crayons. One year, really handsome paint boxes. One year, it was a microscope, not a full-size one, but not a toy, a real microscope. Slides and lenses of varying power, and small specimen boxes and tweezers and pins, the sort of thing that anybody would be proud to have on their bedroom table. Another year, it was a telescope. And yet another time, a small but functioning easel and a set of oil paints, turpentine, linseed oil, brushes, and a palette. I'm sorry to say, these main presents called out my anger, envy, and hostility more than anything else. Why? Because of the difference in scale between Becky's and mine. If we had boxes of Pastels, beautiful, high quality pastels, nestling in corrugated slots, encased in elegant olive wood boxes. Becky's box would have 50 crayons in it, mine only 40. Her paint box, her microscope, her easel would always be a size larger than the one chosen for me, not a great deal larger. But why did they give her the bigger one? "It's not fair," I blurted angrily to Becky on the first occasion. "The paint boxes, perhaps." She wrinkled her fair brows. To her it seemed simple, fair, and reasonable. "Well, first, I'm a year older than you, so I should have a bigger present. And second, I am their daughter. You are only a visitor. You only come once a year." Any other moment I would have thought, and thank goodness for that, but now I felt bitterly resentful. After all, in other ways, they treated me as one of the family, one of equal status in this. "'Cause you're a year younger," she kept repeating. "It wouldn't be proper to give you exactly the same size as me." And she looked at me with what seemed to be infuriating smugness. It always annoyed me when she referred to that year's difference, for I was decidedly the taller and stronger, and besides, knew a great deal more about trains, aircraft, cars, machinery, and mathematics. The only area in which Becky came out was her skill at drawing pictures or painting. She was very good at that. And of course, a tiresome inventiveness when it came to making up stories. And to do her justice, she never once said, "After all, you weren't even invited here in the first place. Your parents asked mine if you could come." On Christmas, the one that I remember most painfully, and the memory of which has ever since given me a nervous dread of finding myself alone at that time. She received an extra present besides her main one. Extra present was from her godfather in America. He was known as Uncle Joe, though not really related. He was Lord Gay-Street and had once been Aunt Nesta's head of department when she worked in the embassy. He often forgot to send presents for several years, but when they did come, they were memorable. Once it was a doll's house, a complete replica of an Italian palace with furniture to match. Once a gold-painted pedal car. We had forgotten just then that Becky was not a boy. I'd always longed for a pedal car when I was younger. Of course, my parents would not think of giving me such an article, and was bitterly jealous of the gift that Becky never cared for, though the little boys loved it. Of course, later Uncle Joe sent her a bike with every possible gear and gadget, which I rode much more than she did. The roller skates, transistors, cameras. I was jealous, not only of the presents, but the fact that she should have a godfather who was a lord. What had she ever done to deserve such love? The year I am recalling, the wooden box from him was large and, as usual, covered with foreign stamps and custom labels. On Christmas morning, Becky left it until all the other presents had been opened. Inside the wooden box was a cardboard one. Besides that, a lot of wood shavings. Under the shavings, a layer of what felt like sheep's wool. Inside that, purple crinkly paper. "At last," She extracted two objects, large dolls. But what dolls? Even I, who had always despised dolls, found them impressive. First, their size. Each of them was about as high as my leg to the knee. One was male, one female. He had black moustache, a sword, and a pistol. She had long, glossy black hair, layers and layers of silk petticoats, and a fan which opened. Their black eyes opened, shut, and rolled. Their clothes were handmade and splendid. Real satin skirts, real velvet breeches, breathed Aunt Nesta. She awed while she inspected them. I wonder what country they're from. Eastern European, perhaps? Or Turkish? Or Russian? Russian seems likely, put in Uncle Simon. Look, they are wearing skates. And Becky, meanwhile, delving into the bottom of the box, found several sets of different clothes, and also a small box which proved to contain batteries. Batteries! So they must be able to move, cried Becky. She found slots in their backs, cunningly concealed under the velvet waistcoat and the silk shawl. She fitted the batteries into the slots. Immediately, the dolls became animated, fidgeted in her hands, and when she put them down, tried to move about, tripped over the turkey rug. "Get them into the passage," cried the little boys. The slippery linoleum of the passage, or on the polished boards of the large bare dining room, the dolls skated with terrific proficiency, gliding, bowing, waltzing, reversing, pirouetting. It seemed almost impossible to believe that they were not small-scale humans. While in motion, they kept almost within touching distance of one another. "They must be magnetized," said Uncle Simon. Only when Becky grabbed them and removed the batteries did they stop skating. He was in ecstasy over them, flushed and bright-eyed. "I love them," she said. "Uncle Joe never sent a better present. They are the best of all." "And there may be little problems when the batteries run out," remarked Uncle Simon. "You won't be able to replace those in a hurry." "When I write my thank you letter to Uncle Joe, I shall ask him if he can send some more." "What shall you call them?" asked Aunt Nesta, beginning to tidy up wrapping paper and coloured ribbon. He had no hesitation at all. "I shall call them Crespian and Clarion." "Where on earth did you find those names?" "In a map somewhere, I think," said Becky vaguely. "They seem just right." Fiercely cold Christmas that year, not snowy, but with bitter winds plucking and keeping ice everywhere, the ground hard as a brick. Aunt Nesta was insistent on keeping Becky indoors. Becky was happy just to sit watching Crespian and Clarion perform their skillful, mysterious dance, on and on and on. And you'd think a boy of my age would not be interested in a pair of dolls, but from the first moment I saw them, I was fascinated, hypnotized, bewitched. I coveted them. I longed, I burned for them. Without the slightest hesitation, I set about planning how I would steal them from Becky. I had often stolen smaller treasures from her, small, precious possessions that could get mislaid. Ivory elephants, the little brass box that had in fact been hers. I hid it inside my sponge bag when I returned home, and if she suspected that I had made off with it, she never accused me. And likewise with the grandfather clock from the doll's house, which had really told the time. With a signet ring, a silver penknife, a gold pen, and other articles, I felt simply that I had a right. Why should they remain in Becky's ownership when I wanted them? At home, my parents never inquired how I came into possession of these things. Very likely they never noticed, since they took no interest in me or my belongings. Dolls were so large, so extraordinary and conspicuous that I would have to take some pains to conceal their presence when I got home, and only let them perform when my mother and father were out of the house, which they were, luckily, a good deal of the time. My bedroom floor was polished pine. That would make a good skating rink. But of course, the main problem was going to be stealing them from Becky in such a way that she, nor Uncle Simon, nor Aunt Nesta could possibly suspect. As a matter of fact, it did not take me long to come up with what seemed like a cast iron plan. Boxing Day afternoon, Uncle Simon and Aunt Nesta took the little boys off to a small children's party. Becky and I were too old to be invited, and though we had suggested taking a walk on the moor, Aunt Nesta decided that it was too cold. Wind is too bitter for you, my honey. Stay indoors. Read some of your new books. Paint a picture with your oil paints. Play with Crespian and Clarion. Such names, she went on laughing. They seem suitable, I must say. Off went the family, and I, meantime, by continued quiet repetition, had persuaded Becky that it would be a wicked shame, a shocking waste, an almost criminal loss of opportunity if we did not try out the skating dolls on real ice, which of course there were, ready to hand at the bottom of the garden. "Dad doesn't like us going near the pond unless he's there," she said doubtfully. "It must be frozen really thick by now," I'd argued, "and we don't have to go on it, only the dolls. We can always get them back with a rake if they go too far from the edge." Of course she was beguiled by the idea. I played on her guilt too. "I've got a rich godfather who sends you fancy presents. I never get anything like that. So it's only fair that we should try out my idea." At last she agreed, and while she was putting on an extra pair of stockings, a chest protector, a flannel petticoat, a second sweater, I slipped outside and prepared for my plan by hacking a good-sized hole in the ice with a pickaxe borrowed from the garden shed when I fetched the rake. Then I went back to the house. "Aren't you ready yet?" "Just coming," she said, tying a second shoelace. "And I must put on my hood." "I'll carry the dolls out," I said. "I'll be slotting in the batteries." "All right," she said, "but don't put them on the ice until I come." "Hey, listen," I said. "I think that's the phone. You better answer it. It might be your granny." He did not stop to consider how unlikely this was until Uncle Simon's mother had already hung up that morning, but hurried off to to the little bare telephone room, and I hid down to the garden shed, where I hid 2 dolls in a nest of hessian already prepared for them. By the time Becky reached the pond, there was nothing to be seen but a hole through the ice, in which, with a rake, I was frantically fishing and dredging. "Oh, no!" cried Becky in horror, and before I could stop her, she ran out into the cracked surface of the pond. I still hate to think about the next few hours. Naturally, in planning to steal the dolls from my cousin Becky, I had never intended that she should suffer a ducking in sub-zero water and come down with pneumonia. I was packed off home, of course, first, because of my disgraceful behaviour. Second, because everybody was far too busy nursing Becky to want me about the place. I was just a horrible reminder of what shouldn't have happened. Since mother and father were fixed for another month in their villa, I could not for a moment consider such a jolt in their programme as a premature return home to take care of me. My aunt Joycelyn was summoned from Bromley and came very much put out to stay in our house. She was there when I arrived, not to welcome, but to denounce. A fine trick to play on your poor cousin. A nice, stupid piece of behaviour, causing all this upset. Well, don't just stand gawping. Take your bag upstairs and of course, I was dying to do just that. All the turmoil at Kelso House. Nobody had thought to inquire about the dolls. They were still in my possession. I scuttled up to my room and opened my suitcase. There, the dolls were still wrapped in hessian. As I furtively thrust them under a pile of shirts, I took them out, fitted in the batteries, and received a freezing breast-stopping shock. My Aunt Jocelyn was a brisk, bossy, interfering woman, quite unlike my parents. I never bothered to set foot in my room, but she had followed me up the stairs, calling out some instructions about dirty clothes. I had just time to fling a dressing gown over the bodies of the dolls before she strode into the room. Just as I expected, clean and dirty things all mixed up. "What's the matter? You look absolutely green." I feel a bit sick." I had the presence of mind to mumble, "That'll be the long journey. You'd best go straight to bed. Here, I'll fetch the dirty clothes basket, and all this stuff can go straight in it." While she was doing I thrust Clarion and Crespian under the bed, keeping my eyes screwed tight shut while I removed the batteries. After a day or two, Jocelyn said, "What in the world's the matter with you, boy? You're pale as a dish rag and nervous as a cricket. When I tapped you on the shoulder just now, you jumped 6 inches in the air. Don't tell me it's because of your cousin Becky. You weren't that fond of her." "It's nothing," I muttered. "I just don't feel very well. It'll be a good thing when school starts again. You spend far too much time up in that room of yours, moping." I spend all my time up there, staring at the dolls. I did not want to. I did not intend to. And yet day after day, after miserable day, I found myself obeying the irresistible urge to go up there, fetch them out under the bed, take the batteries from the box, and slot them in, and then watch hypnotized sick terror while Crespian and Clarion gazed back at me. Night I dreamed about them, staring, staring. At other times I thought about them lying there under the bed, their eyes waiting for me. Way to escape, the only way would be to run down the stairs, down the street, and throw myself into the icy river. I became less and less responsive or aware of other people. Sounds, voices, footsteps, remarks made to me. The dolls were all I thought about. So after about 10 days, when one afternoon Joycelyn burst open my bedroom door, she found me crouched on the floor staring at Crispin and Clarion, who were staring back at me. They did not skate anymore. No, no. I've some bad news. Your cousin Becky has died, Jocelyn began, and then her voice gave out. Her eyes were fixed, glued on the dolls. Merciful heavens, she whispered. What in the world are those horrible things? And why do they shake their eyes from side to side like that? All the eyes, hers and theirs, swam together in a dizzy circle, and I fainted. When I came to, my Aunt Jocelyn told me sternly that the dolls had been burned in the garden incinerator. The best place for them, if you ask me. And now you had better tell me the whole story, she said. So I told it to her, as I have told it to you. I never went back to Marwick, and that is why, the headmaster said, I run a school for delinquents. I know such a lot about stealing. Wasn't that creepy? I'm afraid my voice is starting to go, my darling. I think I may need this drink. Goodness, goodness. Sorry, my throat is very, very sore. I think that'll be the last book that I read you, unless I want my voice to completely go for Christmas, which will not be a good idea. If I feel a bit better later on, I'll probably come down and read you one more. But for now, I need to take a very, very, very long break and rest my vocal cords. I'll wave to the camera and I'll say goodbye for now. I will see you all hopefully later on. Bye bye.